Welcome back to our channel for another deep dive into the glamorous, cutthroat, and endlessly dramatic world of Los Angeles high fashion. Today is a magnificent day to unpack the latest, most explosive developments from our favorite daytime drama. The runway is set, the blinding lights are flashing, and the betrayals are sharper than a tailor's shears. Let us step right into the heart of the latest corporate and emotional warfare. The fashion industry in Los Angeles has always been a ruthless battlefield of massive egos, legendary legacies, and delicate silk. But the recent schism between the established Forrester Creations and the rapidly expanding Logan brand has escalated this corporate Cold War into an absolute inferno. Hope Logan Spencer's shocking, clandestine defection from her family's legacy company to join forces with Katie and Bill Spencer at the Logan Empire set the stage for a confrontation of epic proportions. Bringing the underappreciated but boundlessly talented Deke Sharp along with her, Hope orchestrated a masterclass in corporate revenge against Steffy Forrester's condescending regime. The highly anticipated launch of the new collections was not merely a presentation of fabric and form. It was a visceral, highly publicized reckoning designed to determine which dynasty truly holds the crown in the modern era of haute couture. Leading the charge for Forrester Creations was R.J. Forrester, the self-proclaimed golden boy who had recently been riding an intoxicating, dangerous wave of toxic arrogance. Having successfully manipulated his father, Ridge, into firing his rival Will Spencer after their violent physical altercation at the bikini bar, R.J. felt utterly invincible. He firmly believed that with Will permanently out of the picture and the entire weight of Eric Forrester's legendary couture line resting squarely on his shoulders, he was destined to absolutely dominate the catwalk. RJ's mindset was a volatile cocktail of blind entitlement and severe overconfidence. He walked the hallowed halls of Forrester Creations with a smug, unbreakable smirk, entirely convinced that his heritage and his classic design sensibilities would effortlessly crush the upstart Logan brand and publicly humiliate Hope and Deke in the process. The atmosphere on the night of the dual fashion launch was thick with palpable, suffocating tension and the relentless flashing bulbs of international paparazzi. The venue was split, both metaphorically and literally, between the established, traditional opulence of Forrester Creations and the hungry, wildly innovative energy of the Logan brand. RJ stood backstage, adjusting the lapels of his impeccably tailored suit, listening to the low, expectant hum of the elite crowd gathering beyond the curtain. He eagerly envisioned the standing ovations, the glowing critical reviews, and the absolute validation of his status as the rightful, undisputed heir to the Forrester throne. He had spent weeks poring over Eric's classic silhouettes, playing it incredibly safe while genuinely believing he was preserving a sacred, untouchable legacy. He was completely unprepared for the devastating reality check that was about to unfold under the glaring runway lights. As the orchestral music swelled, RJ's highly anticipated collection took the runway first. The garments were undeniably beautiful, featuring rich, heavy fabrics, elegant cuts, and a clear, respectful homage to the legendary aesthetic that had built the Forrester empire from the ground up. However, to the highly trained, ruthless eyes of the fashion critics sitting in the front row, the collection felt undeniably stagnant. It was a predictable repetition of past glories, lacking the fiery, risk-taking innovation required to capture the modern zeitgeist. The applause that followed the final walk was polite, respectful of the Forrester name and history, but entirely devoid of the electric, breathless enthusiasm that RJ had so desperately anticipated. He stood in the wings, his confident smile faltering slightly as he sensed the tepid energy in the room, blissfully unaware that the true storm was only moments away from making landfall. Then, the ambient lighting shifted abruptly. The music took on a pulsating, avant-garde rhythm, and the Logan brand's collection, spearheaded by Hope and designed exclusively by Deke Sharp, stormed the catwalk with unapologetic ferocity. It was an absolute revelation. Deke, Finally unleashed from the suffocating budgetary constraints and creative suppression he had suffered at Forster Creations, delivered a groundbreaking array of designs that completely shattered the conventional boundaries of high fashion. The pieces were daring, fluid, unapologetically modern, and infused with a raw, emotional vulnerability that captivated every single person in the room. Hope's visionary guidance had seamlessly channeled Deke's raw talent into an absolute masterpiece, completely and utterly overshadowing the classic, safe, and ultimately stale aesthetic that RJ had just presented. The crowd erupted into a deafening roar of genuine awe and thunderous, sustained applause. The morning after the spectacular launch, the media fallout was swift, brutal, and entirely merciless. The elite fashion critics, whom RJ had arrogantly assumed would bow to his lineage, instead delivered a devastating, career-altering verdict that would echo through the corridors of Forster Creations for years to come. The headlines universally praised Deke Sharp as the industry's brilliant, new genius, a visionary who had breathed desperate, essential life into a stagnant market. But the glowing praise for Deke was nothing compared to the vicious, eviscerating critiques aimed directly at R.J. Forster. One prominent, highly respected publication branded R.J. with a moniker that would instantly become his ultimate, inescapable nightmare, a heritage parasite. The scathing article argued that R.J. was merely coasting on the coattails of his grandfather's monumental legacy, lacking the original spark, the creative courage, and the raw talent necessary to stand on his own in the cutthroat world of high fashion. Reading those exact words, heritage parasite, shattered RJ's fragile, inflated ego into a million jagged, irreparable pieces. The psychological crisis that immediately followed was profound, terrifying, and all-consuming. All the arrogance, the smug superiority, and the deep-seated entitlement evaporated in an instant, replaced by a suffocating, paralyzing wave of severe imposter syndrome. RJ stared at the glowing screen of his tablet, the cruel words burning into his retinas as a deep, terrifying realization began to take root in his spiraling mind. What if the ruthless critics were entirely right? What if he was nothing more than a privileged nepotism baby, propped up solely by his famous last name and his parents' immense influence, entirely devoid of the raw, undeniable talent that Deke Sharp possessed so effortlessly? The very foundation of his identity, built entirely on the assumption of inherent greatness, crumbled violently beneath his feet. This profound professional humiliation triggered a severe, agonizing internal conflict within RJ. He had always believed that being a Forster was his greatest asset, an impenetrable golden shield against failure and mediocrity. Now, that very name felt like a suffocating, crushing weight, an impossible standard of excellence he was fundamentally incapable of meeting. He paced his luxurious design office like a trapped animal, violently tearing up sketches and hurling expensive fabric swatches across the room in fits of agonizing, helpless frustration. The ghost of Eric Forster's unparalleled genius seemed to mock him from every corner of the building. RJ's mind quickly became a toxic, inescapable echo chamber of self-doubt and loathing, amplifying every hidden insecurity he had ever harbored about his place in the legendary family and his true worth as an artist. As if the professional devastation were not agonizing enough, RJ's festering jealousy and paranoia soon bled violently into his personal life, creating a catastrophic emotional domino effect. The final, agonizing blow came when he witnessed a quiet moment that twisted the knife deep into his already bleeding pride. Electra Forster, the woman RJ had been obsessively trying to win over, manipulate, and protect from his bitter rival Will Spencer, was seen openly expressing her profound, genuine admiration for Deke Sharp's groundbreaking collection. RJ stood hidden in the shadows of the design suite, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned stark white, as he listened to Electra praise his rival's undeniable genius. She spoke of Deke's work with a reverence, a passion, and a glowing respect that RJ had desperately, hungrily craved for himself. Completely unaware of the terrifying monster she was inadvertently feeding in RJ's fragile, fractured psyche. Seeing Elektra, who had already broken his heart and wounded his ego by reconciling with his bitter enemy, Will, now showering glowing praise upon the very man who had just publicly humiliated him on the runway, pushed RJ entirely over the psychological edge. His jealousy of Deke Sharp was no longer confined to the professional realm of fabric, thread, and runway reviews. It morphed rapidly into a deeply personal, consuming, and irrational hatred. In RJ's warped, spiraling mind, Deke Sharp had not only stolen his professional glory and exposed him to the world as a total fraud, but he was also captivating the attention and respect of the woman RJ felt entitled to possess. The toxic, volatile combination of romantic rejection and absolute professional annihilation created a perfect, devastating storm of vindictive rage within the young Forrester heir. Driven by this blinding, frantic desperation to salvage his shattered reputation and regain a semblance of control over his spiraling narrative, RJ began to engage in a series of highly destructive, erratic, and deeply unethical behaviors. He simply could not accept the reality that Deke was a superior designer. His fragile ego required a fabricated narrative where he was the innocent victim of a grand, orchestrated conspiracy. RJ started actively plotting to sabotage the Logan brand, using his immense wealth, his family's vast resources, and his Forrester connections to try and undermine Deke's newfound, massive success. He considered planting vicious, false rumors in the fashion press, attempting to bribe international suppliers to delay critical Logan shipments, and even contemplating corporate espionage to steal Deke's upcoming, highly anticipated concepts. RJ was no longer focused on elevating his own art. He was entirely consumed by the singular, manic, and destructive goal of destroying Deke Sharp at any cost. This tragic descent into madness and paranoia did not go unnoticed by those around him. RJ's frantic, unpredictable behavior began to rapidly alienate the few allies he had left at Forrester Creations. He snapped viciously at the loyal seamstresses, belittled the hard-working junior designers, and even lashed out at his father, Ridge, accusing him of being weak and not doing enough to protect the sacred family legacy from the ruthless Spencer Logan onslaught. Zen Forrester, who had recently swallowed his own immense pride to call a temporary truce with RJ, watched with a complex mixture of disgust, pity, and quiet vindication as the so-called golden boy completely unraveled before his eyes. RJ's frantic, desperate attempts to assert dominance only served to highlight his profound weakness, pushing him further into an isolated, terrifying vortex of his own making. RJ Forrester was now hopelessly trapped in a suffocating vortex of his own selfishness and hatred, unable to see the catastrophic damage he was inflicting upon himself. The tragic, bitter irony of his situation was inescapable. In his desperate, ruthless attempts to prove to the world that he was more than just a heritage parasite, his vindictive, underhanded actions were proving the harsh critics entirely right. He was relying heavily on dirty tactics, manipulation, as family's institutional power rather than raw talent, innovation, and hard work. The psychological toll of this subconscious realization was destroying him from the inside out. He had fought so hard to push Will Spencer out of the company, only to find himself facing a far more formidable, talented, and universally beloved adversary in Deke Sharp. RJ's dark obsession with destroying Deke and punishing Elektra for her perceived betrayal was slowly but surely eroding whatever remained of his humanity and artistic integrity. As the glitter and dust from the explosive fashion launch began to settle over Los Angeles, the landscape of the industry is forever altered. Deke Sharp stands triumphant, a newly crowned genius basking in the warm, validating glow of Hope Logan's visionary leadership at the massively successful Logan brand. Meanwhile, RJ Forrester sits alone in the dark ruins of his own arrogance, a broken humiliated prince consumed by a toxic, festering jealousy. The battle lines have been drastically redrawn, and the emotional and corporate stakes have never been higher. RJ's severe psychological crisis and his impending, frantic sabotage plot threaten to ignite a corporate and personal war that could easily burn Forrester Creations to the ground. The Golden Boy has fallen from grace, and in his place stands a dangerous, desperate man with absolutely nothing left to lose